I talk to dead. Hi there. My name is Emily Watson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified grief counselor. Now, it might be a little disconcerting if someone was to walk up to you and tell you that they talk to dead people, but not so much in my line of work. As a grief counselor, it's something that I hear quite often. It is actually common for people to tell me that they're having conversations with their deceased spouse, deceased parents, or deceased child. It is a natural and normal part of the grief process. Now, not everyone experiences this, but it's common enough that I think it's important to talk about. My invitation for you today is to think about your own lived experience with grief. Think about how it affected you emotionally, cognitively, behaviorally, physically, and spiritually.
Let's begin by talking about some common myths and misperceptions about grief. Time heals all wounds.
So, we have all heard that old adage that time heals all wounds. And the truth is, most people do experience a decrease in pain as time goes on. But time alone does not guarantee that your wounds will heal.
Grief follows a timeline. It shouldn't last longer than 12 months, 18 months, or 24 months.
There is no timeline for grief. You may find that you grieve for a relatively short period of time, or you may grieve in some form for the rest of your life.
The first year is the hardest.
Grief is hard. Grief is so incredibly hard. And there's no timeline. You may actually find that your second year is harder than your first. Maybe you were a little bit numb that first year. Maybe it didn't quite feel real. And then that second year starts to roll in. Reality starts to set in. Maybe there's a little more loneliness, a lot more emotions. There are a lot of reasons why the second year can feel harder. Just know that if your second year felt harder, you're not alone.
Tears are a sign of weakness.
Tears are a natural physiological release. Now, not everyone cries, and that's okay. But it's important to remember that tears are beneficial. They're beneficial for the release of stress and tension. It's your body's natural healing mechanism.
Women grieve more than men.
Here's the thing. Men and women can experience grief differently, and men and women have been socialized to express emotion differently. And keep in mind that every person is unique. Some grievers are more emotionally expressive, and others are more cognitive or problem solving. The way that a person grieves, however, is absolutely not a measure of their pain.
Ignoring your pain will make it go away.
So there are times when you need to compartmentalize your pain. Absolutely. There are times when you need to compartmentalize it. But just know that that's not an effective long-term strategy. In fact, avoidance can lead to prolonged grief.
There are specific and predictable stages to grieving.
This is my favorite one. Grief does not follow any predictable stages. I know that's what we've all been taught, but the research simply does not bear this out. There are no predictable stages. Grief has its own timeline, and it's unique to the individual.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross first published her book in 1969, describing the 5 stages of death and dying. Kubler-Ross provided compassionate care for people who were in the process of dying from a terminal illness, and her work has contributed greatly to our global awareness and understanding of loss. In the 50-plus years since that time, however, grief researchers have not found evidence to support stage theory. What we have learned is that grief is a complex neurobiological process that can impact us emotionally, cognitively, behaviorally, physically, and spiritually.
One of the challenging aspects of grief is just how rapidly our emotional state can shift. Rest assured, you are not going crazy. What you are experiencing is the natural response to loss. In the beginning, the waves can be very intense and unrelenting. It can feel like you're being hit with a tsunami of emotions, one after another, with barely any space to breathe. As time goes on, your relationship with the waves changes. You might still feel as if you are overwhelmed at times, but you will also learn to rest, to float, and to swim. One of the most defining emotions of grief is sadness. Loss almost always brings feelings of sadness, and a wave of sadness can hit you anywhere, anytime. It can hit you at the grocery store when you see a loved one's favorite cereal. It can hit you when you're out for a walk. It is also common to feel anxiety or panic. Even if you've never had a panic attack, a traumatic loss can usher in feelings of uncertainty, danger, and helplessness, leading to heightened anxiety. People often feel as if they are unsafe after a traumatic loss from something like suicide, homicide, or an accident. In these situations, it can be helpful to seek out a therapist that offers both grief and trauma counseling. Another common emotion is anger. Although anger does not always go by its name, sometimes it shows up as irritability, annoyance, or just a feeling like things are not fair. Guilt and shame are also common. Many grievers experience some form of guilt. All those what ifs and if onlys keep you replaying a version of the death that makes you responsible. This is especially true for suicide loss survivors. Those who have lost someone to suicide walk through the canyon of why? Why? This canyon is tall and deep and hard to climb out of. We need for things to make sense, and often suicide leaves us with unanswered questions. Loneliness is another big emotion, especially for those who have lost a spouse or a partner. You may also experience feelings of yearning, where you just really miss that person and want to be with them, or feelings of shock, numbness, vulnerability, hopelessness, powerlessness, or even apathy. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about jealousy. People often feel shame for experiencing jealousy. But watching someone else's child reach milestones that your child will never experience is very painful. And yes, you will be jealous of their seemingly normal life, even though you care deeply about them and you want the best for them. Jealousy is just a normal and natural part of losing someone you love. Our brains undergo some profound changes after a devastating loss. It has a painful problem to solve. When your loved one was alive, your brain created a special kind of map for that person, and a lot of time and energy was used to create that map. Now your brain must create new connections, patterns, and schemas that integrate the reality of that loss. This takes time and energy. It is one of the reasons that grief can feel so exhausting. With each wave of grief, your brain takes note and begins to slowly, very slowly, day after day, month after month, and year after year, to create a new mental map. In addition, cortisol is released when we grieve, which impacts normal brain function. Many people notice challenges with memory, decision making, attention, concentration, disbelief, depersonalization, confusion, and forgetfulness. This is often referred to as grief brain. As you can imagine, grief also impacts us behaviorally. Some of the behaviors that you might expect with grief are changes in appetite, crying, restlessness, and changes in activity level. Many people find it difficult to get out of bed in the morning, especially in those first few months. Things that we used to do easily now require more energy and effort, sometimes more than we have available. As a result, some things get placed on the back burner, like personal hygiene, self-care, housekeeping, and maybe some home maintenance. Another behavioral change that can happen is social withdrawal. This is something that I hear quite frequently. Some grievers simply do not have the energy for social interaction, or they say that they find it exhausting to wear a societal mask when they leave the home. Pretending to be okay is a lot of work. It's easier to isolate, but grief is lonely enough. When we isolate, feelings of loneliness can increase. Lastly, there are some grief behaviors that serve as a connection to the decedent. This can include treasuring or carrying objects that belong to the deceased, searching for the deceased, dreaming of the deceased, and maintaining an ongoing internal dialogue with the decedent. Interestingly, these behaviors do not always align with one's religious or spiritual beliefs. Some people believe that their loved one is near to them, while others do not. As an example, I've had atheist clients that do not believe in an afterlife, but still talk to their loved ones in their head as a way of maintaining a sense of connection.
If you notice any new or unusual physical symptoms, consult a medical professional. Grief can take a toll on our physical health.
Your body remembers love. Your body remembers play. And your body remembers joy. And when we grieve, it also remembers sadness and anger, anxiety, fear, and so much more. Our body shows us that it remembers with stomach aches, digestive challenges, or headaches. Our minds and our bodies are beautifully interconnected, even in pain. Some people experience somatic or physical symptoms of grief more than emotional or cognitive changes. One of the most common is something people refer to as broken heart syndrome. That is, the person might experience tightness in the chest or heart palpitations with no known physical cause. Grief takes a toll on our physical health. Our immune system tends to work less optimally. We may find that we get sick more than usual, or we may notice that we lack energy. Other physical experiences include tightness in one's throat, muscle weakness, dry mouth, shortness of breath, dizziness, and back pain. Lastly, some people may experience sensitivity to environmental stimuli, such as noise or lights or movement. Just like other experiences with grief, a person's spiritual or religious experiences are highly personal and unique. Even so, there are a couple of experiences that seem to transcend all beliefs. First, loss reminds us about what is important in life. It tends to refocus our attention and asks us to reconsider our priorities. Secondly, the need to create meaning is fairly universal. People almost always need to make sense of loss. Some people will experience renewed faith and possibly a deeper connection with their higher power. It is comforting to be provided with solace from one's spiritual leaders and support from one's faith community, especially when living with loss. It can also be adaptive. Grievers with strong beliefs may experience less uncertainty. For many, religious texts and beliefs offer a spiritual roadmap for hope and the possibility of reunification with loved ones. However, there are others who have almost the opposite experience. Loss challenges everything they thought they knew. Grievers may experience a loss of faith, disillusionment, or shifting views. This kind of existential questioning happens often, and it's hard to predict the path it will take. Some may move away from spiritual or religious leanings. There may be a shift toward pragmatism or skepticism. Others may experience a kind of spiritual awakening. They may begin to talk about synchronicities, signs, and the afterlife in ways they had not considered before. The bottom line is that grief will probably change you in some way. You may find that it strengthens your beliefs, or you may find that it challenges you to move beyond long-held beliefs. The thing to remember is that your grief journey is unique to you.
Now that we've talked about how we grieve, let's switch gears and talk about some of the things that we grieve. We grieve death and non-death losses. The end of a relationship is very painful. In many ways, it can even feel like a death. Job loss is another example of a non-death loss. The loss of physical health can also be very challenging and is something that people may grieve. One of the interesting things about grief is that we can grieve both sad and happy changes. Moving is one example. The move might be a positive change, yet there still may be a part of you that grieves the loss of community or familiarity. Many parents may be familiar with those pangs of grief that happen when our children start school or move away to college. Think about some of the changes and transitions that have happened over the course of your life, both happy and sad. How did you handle the changes?
Grief is a lot. There's a lot going on when we grieve, and it can be overwhelming. But there are strategies that can help you along your way. Let's take a few minutes to listen to some of the things that have helped other people as they move through their grief.
Be mindful of your basic needs. Grief can take a toll on your physical health. It's important to ensure that you are eating well, exercising, and getting enough sleep. Your body needs fuel, movement, and rest. If you notice any new or unusual physical symptoms, seek medical attention immediately. Your body needs special care when you are grieving.
Incorporate grief rituals into your day. This can be as simple as lighting a candle, placing your hand over your heart and noticing the feelings that are coming up, or holding an item of importance of your loved one and allowing the memories to come. Or you may just want to sit quietly and reflect. It is your ritual. Do what feels natural.
Keep a planner or calendar. Remember, your brain has a lot going on. This can help with memory and organization.
Find creative ways to express your grief. This might include writing, dancing, or painting. Art is a form of language when we do not have the words to express what's deep inside.
If you are feeling that no one really truly understands your pain, you might consider joining a support group. It can be helpful to get to know other people that have experienced a similar kind of loss.
Expand your knowledge base. For grievers that tend to be more cognitive in their approach to loss, there are plenty of resources out there. Consider books or courses that build awareness and understanding about loss.
Learn and practice new coping strategies. There are going to be times when you feel overwhelmed. Practice some new self-soothing strategies in moments of calm so that you have them at your ready when you need them.
We live in a grief-averse culture. As a result, you may find that you need to manage your expectations of others. Many people are uncomfortable with death and open expressions of grief, and some people have never been told that it's okay to feel what they feel. Some friends and family members may have very narrow scripts for a small list of acceptable emotions. Unfortunately, grief lives outside those narrow parameters. With a significant loss, you may find yourself plunged to depths of emotion that you have never experienced. Emotions that you, yourself, could not have imagined before the loss. Some friends and family members may genuinely want to support you and not know how. Others may simply disappear. Just remember that their responses to your grief may be less about you and more about their level of comfort with their own and others' emotions and life experiences. In addition, each person that chooses to show up for you will most likely play a unique role in your grief journey. You may be able to count on one friend for a light-hearted adventure that provides much-needed respite. Another friend may be the one you sit with as you process your emotions. Each one will have strengths and limitations, and that's okay. You will also grow and learn through your grief and possibly light the path for others that come after you.
Look for ways to nourish your spirit. This may include prayer, meditation, or communing with nature.
Be patient with yourself. You're going through something very difficult. Your path may not look like someone else's. It may be filled with unexpected twists, turns, and stalls. But it is your path, and it is the right path for you.